Just weeks after burying my beloved Arthur, my daughter-in-law Serena stormed into the lawyer's office, spitting venom. She accused me of manipulating my dying husband, branding me a greedy old woman, then declared she and my son were cutting me off entirely. I sat there, stunned, watching them walk away, but they had no idea what Arthur had truly planned. Join me as I share my journey, and please share, and let me know where you're listening from. The heavy weight of the manila folder felt oddly comforting in my hands, a tangible link to Arthur, even after he was gone. Inside, nestled amongst other legal documents, was the deed to the apartment building, its crisp paper, a stark contrast to the blurry grief that still clouded my vision. Just 3 weeks. 3 weeks since I'd stood by his grave, the cold earth, a cruel reminder of the warmth I had lost. Now, here I was, in Mr. Sterling's hushed office, trying to process the finality of it all. The quiet solemnity of the room was abruptly shattered. The door, which Mr. Sterling had carefully left ajar, was violently pushed open. Serena Vance, my daughter-in-law, stood framed in the doorway, her face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Her eyes, usually sparkling with a calculated charm, were now narrowed slits of rage, fixed on me. She didn't bother with a greeting, or even a pretense of politeness. Her voice, usually soft and melodious, was a guttural snarl that cut through the silence like a jagged blade. "You really did it, didn't you, Ellie?" she spat, her words laced with venom. "You manipulated him. My father-in-law, my dying father-in-law, who was barely lucid in his last days. You coerced him into leaving you everything." She took a step into the room, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, shaking slightly. "The apartment building? Everything? How could you be so utterly heartless?" Mr. Sterling, a man whose composure was legendary in legal circles, visibly flinched. He shifted uncomfortably in his plush leather chair, his gaze darting between Serena and me, his polite, professional smile wilting. His fingers drummed a nervous rhythm on the polished mahogany desk, clearly signaling his discomfort with this highly unprofessional display. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, not from guilt, but from the sheer audacity of her accusation. "Serena," I began, my voice a quiet tremor, trying to inject some calm into the volatile air. My grief was still so raw, I found it hard to raise my voice. "Arthur made his own decisions. He was of sound mind, right up until the end. We discussed his wishes extensively. There was no manipulation." My heart ached at the insinuation. A fresh wound opened on top of my bereavement. Arthur was a man of firm convictions, not easily swayed by anyone, let alone coerced. But Serena wasn't listening. Her eyes were glazed over with a self-righteous indignation that distorted her features. "Don't pretend, Ellie," she snarled, stepping closer, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper that somehow felt more menacing than her shouting. "You've been poisoning him against us for years, filling his head with all sorts of ridiculous notions, telling him we were ungrateful, that we didn't appreciate him enough. All so you could swoop in and inherit everything." The accusation stung, sharp and unwarranted. Poisoning Arthur's mind? The idea was preposterous. Arthur had always been fiercely independent, making his own judgments. He valued honesty above all else. But in Serena's narrative, I was the villain, orchestrating a cruel betrayal from beyond the grave. She took another step, her voice rising again, dripping with a malicious sarcasm that made my stomach churn. "Well, congratulations, Ellie. You got what you wanted, you greedy old woman. I hope you're happy, living in your grand building, all alone, knowing what you did." Her words hung in the air, heavy with a bitterness that felt like a physical blow. My son, Ethan, usually so gentle and diplomatic, stood silently behind Serena, his face a mask of stony disapproval. He didn't meet my gaze, and that hurt more than Serena's venomous tirade. His silence was an endorsement of her words, a betrayal that cut deeper than any insult. Then came the final, crushing blow. "Ethan and I are done," Serena declared, her voice firm, unwavering. "We're cutting all ties. You won't hear from us again. You won't see your grandchildren. You're out of our lives." With that, She spun on her heel, Ethan following her without a word, his back a rigid line of rejection. The door slammed shut behind them with a resounding thud that echoed in the sudden, cavernous silence of the office, sealing my fate. I sat there, utterly numb, the deed still clutched in my hand. The quiet hum of the air conditioning was the only sound now, a stark contrast to the storm that had just raged. My mind reeled, from grieving widow to family outcast in a matter of minutes. The shock was profound, a cold wave washing over me, chilling me to the bone. How quickly my world had been irrevocably altered, transforming me from Arthur's beloved wife into a villain in my own son's eyes. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat, a hesitant sound in the aftermath. "Ellie? Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle, laced with concern. I nodded mutely, unable to form words. My throat felt constricted, a lump of sorrow and disbelief lodged there. I looked down at the inheritance papers scattered on the desk, the deed to the apartment building lying on top. Arthur's legacy. It represented not just a financial asset, but his years of hard work, his careful planning for my future. It offered me a much-needed sense of security in a world that now felt incredibly precarious, and the bitter irony of it all. I remembered the conversations Arthur and I had shared, late at night, in the quiet intimacy of our bedroom. He'd talked about the building as a source of stability for me, but also as a potential resource for Ethan and Serena. We'd even discussed how the rental income could potentially help them with their increasingly burdensome mortgage, a concern they frequently voiced. I had envisioned a way for this inheritance to actually strengthen our family, to provide a buffer for everyone. Instead, it had ripped us apart. 2 days limped by, a blur of silent tears and a gnawing emptiness in the house Arthur and I had shared for so many happy years. The silence was deafening. The absence of Ethan and Serena's usual calls a fresh wound. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life, but the apartment building, now mine, called to me, a practical demand amidst the emotional turmoil. I knew I couldn't wallow forever. With a deep breath, I forced myself to dress, to put on a brave face, and drove to the Riverside Apartments. The 4-story brick building stood stoically against the gray autumn sky, a monument to a bygone era. It was exactly as Arthur had described it, a solid, sturdy structure, but one that undeniably showed its age. Patches of ivy clawed at the brickwork, peeling paint marred some window frames, and the wrought iron railing leading up to the main entrance was rusted in places. It wasn't dilapidated, but it was certainly far from pristine. A flicker of concern sparked within me. Arthur had always been so meticulous, so proud of his properties. This gentle neglect seemed out of character for him. I fumbled with the key Arthur had entrusted to me, finally unlocking the heavy wooden door to the ground floor office. The moment I stepped inside, my nose was assaulted by a thick, musty odor, a cocktail of stale air, forgotten dust, and something indefinably old. Dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight that pierced the grimy window panes, illuminating the forgotten state of the room. A single, rickety desk dominated the space, covered in a fine layer of dust, atop which sat an old, clunky landline telephone. Against one wall, a 4-drawer filing cabinet stood, its metal frame dull and uninviting. My first task was clear: locate the tenant records. With a sigh, I approached the filing cabinet. The top drawer groaned in protest as I pulled, sticking stubbornly. I braced myself, tugging harder, my muscles protesting. With a sudden lurch and a metallic screech, it finally gave way, revealing rows of neatly organized folders. Arthur, despite the building's outward appearance, had always been meticulous with paperwork. I smiled faintly, a small warmth spreading through me at this familiar trait. I began my careful review, pulling out each folder, checking the tenant name, apartment number, and the dates of rent payments. Most records showed consistent, timely payments. Apartment 1, A. Mrs. Henderson, paid on the 1st of every month. Apartment 2C, the Miller family, always prompt. A small sense of relief washed over me. Perhaps my initial worries about the building's finances were unfounded. Then I reached the folder labeled Apartment 4B, Thorne, Lucas. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened it. My eyes scanned the ledger, tracing the entries, expecting to see a similar pattern of regularity. Instead, my blood ran cold. The last entry for a payment was dated March 2016. March 2016. 8 years ago. My mind struggled to comprehend it. I double-checked, thinking I must have misread, or perhaps the ledger was incomplete. But no, the entries stopped abruptly then. A gaping hole in the payment history. My breath hitched. My arithmetic, usually quick, now felt painfully slow as I mentally calculated the loss. March 2016 to October 2024. 8 years and 7 months. Each month, the rent for apartment 4B was listed at $750. 8 years, 91 months, plus 7 more. 98 months. 98 months multiplied by $750. My hands began to shake as the number solidified in my mind. Over $73,500. No, wait. Arthur had increased the rent to $775 in 2020, and then again to $800 in 2022. The total was even higher. A quick recalculation brought the staggering sum closer to $76,000, perhaps more with late fees. $76,000. Lost. Unpaid. It was an astronomical sum, especially considering all the other tenants paid regularly. Lucas Thorne was a glaring anomaly, a financial black hole consuming Arthur's income. Why would Arthur, a man who prided himself on his financial acumen, allow such a monumental debt to accrue? It defied logic, contradicted everything I knew about him. I flipped through the folder, searching for more clues, my heart hammering against my ribs. I found the original lease agreement for Lucas Thorne, dated 2014. It bore Arthur's distinctive signature at the bottom. But something about it made me pause. The ink, compared to other documents signed around the same time, looked fresher, suspiciously new. A shiver of unease traced its way down my spine. Had this document been tampered with? Or was it simply my imagination, fueled by anxiety? That night, sleep was an elusive phantom. My mind raced, churning with questions, suspicions, and a growing sense of dread. $76,000. Why? Why would Arthur let this happen? He was not a man to simply give away money, especially not such a significant amount. He was generous, yes, but not foolish. He meticulously balanced his books, managed his investments with a hawk's eye. This unpaid rent was a glaring, inexplicable blot on his otherwise pristine financial record. I reviewed the building's overall financial records, which were stored in another, more secure cabinet Arthur kept at home. The numbers were grim. The building, while not losing money outright, was barely breaking even. Maintenance costs, property taxes, utilities, insurance, all were steadily rising. Arthur had been quietly covering the shortfalls, plugging the gaps with money from his personal savings, money that was supposed to be for our retirement, for our future, the money Serena accused me of being greedy for. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. The realization settled heavily in my stomach. I couldn't afford this. The building, intended as my security, was quickly becoming a liability, hemorrhaging money because of one tenant. A decision, stark and unavoidable, formed in my mind. Lucas Thorne had to go. I wouldn't be able to sleep until this situation was resolved. I fired up Arthur's old desktop computer, its hum a comforting presence in the quiet house, and began searching online for eviction notices for non-payment of rent. The next morning, armed with printed eviction notices and a newfound resolve, I returned to the Riverside Apartments. The climb to the 4th floor felt like an ascent into an unknown territory. As I reached apartment 4B, my gaze fell upon the wooden doorframe, scratched deeply into the wood, a crude but deliberate carving. LT plus ID forever. 2 sets of initials, intertwined, a declaration of permanence. A fresh wave of curiosity, mixed with a strange premonition, washed over me. Who was ID? And why did Arthur allow Lucas Thorne, a man who hadn't paid rent in 8 years, to essentially live here for free? The mystery of apartment 4B was only just beginning to unravel. My hand, holding the stack of eviction notices, trembled slightly as I knocked on the door of apartment 4B. The crude initials LT plus ID forever seemed to mock me from the doorframe, a cryptic message that suddenly felt heavy with untold secrets. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I assumed would be a confrontational encounter with a deadbeat tenant. The door creaked open, revealing a man in his early 40s. He was tall, with a lean build and kind eyes that held a surprising depth. But it wasn't just his eyes that caught my attention. They were a vivid, striking shade of green, exactly the same hue as Arthur's. My heart gave an involuntary lurch, a strange premonition twisting in my gut. This wasn't just any tenant. He didn't look surprised to see me. In fact, there was an unnerving calm in his demeanor, as if he had been expecting me all along. "You must be Ellie," he said, his voice soft and even, a stark contrast to the anger I had been anticipating. "I've been expecting you." His words threw me off balance. Expected me? How? I managed to regain some semblance of my resolve, clutching the papers tighter. "Mr. Thorne," I began, my voice a little shakier than I would have liked. "I'm here about the apartment. Specifically, the 8 years of unpaid rent." I held out the eviction notices, my hand still trembling slightly. He glanced at the papers, then back at my face, a flicker of something unreadable in those green eyes. "Please, come in," he offered, stepping aside to allow me entry. "We should talk." Hesitantly, I stepped across the threshold. The apartment, to my surprise, was immaculate. It was sparsely furnished but spotlessly clean, bathed in the soft morning light filtering through the window. There were no piles of dirty dishes, no overflowing trash cans, no signs of neglect. Instead, a sense of quiet order permeated the space. A stack of books sat neatly on a small side table, a framed landscape print hung on the wall, and the air, unlike the musty office downstairs, smelled faintly of citrus and old paper. It was, in a word, homey. "Can I get you some coffee?" Lucas asked, gesturing towards a small, neat kitchen area. "I just brewed a fresh pot." "No, thank you," I replied, my voice still stiff. I needed to remain focused, to not be swayed by his unexpected politeness. "Mr. Thorne, this isn't a social call. I've reviewed the records. You haven't paid rent since March 2016. That's over $76,000. I simply cannot allow this to continue." Lucas sighed, a slow, heavy sound that seemed to carry the weight of years. He turned to face me fully, his green eyes, so startlingly like Arthur's, filled with a profound sadness. "Your husband never told you about me, did he, Ellie?" His question was soft, almost a whisper, but it landed in the quiet room with the force of a physical blow. My breath caught in my throat. What was he talking about? Arthur? Told me about him? My mind raced, trying to connect the dots, but found only blank spaces. Told me what? I managed to croak out, my voice barely audible. Without another word, Lucas walked to a small bookshelf against the wall. He picked up a silver-framed photograph and handed it to me. My fingers closed around the cool metal, my gaze fixed on the image. It was a photograph from another era, faded slightly with time but still remarkably clear. A younger Arthur, perhaps in his late 30s, stood in the center, a broad, unfamiliar smile on his face. His arm was around a beautiful woman with dark, flowing hair and warm, expressive eyes. She was holding a tiny baby wrapped in a soft blanket. The baby, with a shock of dark hair, was undeniably Lucas. But it was more than just the image of a younger Arthur with another woman and a baby that stunned me. It was the ring. On Arthur's left hand, clear as day, was a simple gold band. Not the wedding ring I had given him, but an unfamiliar one. My blood ran cold. The eviction notices slipped from my grasp, fluttering to the polished wooden floor like fallen leaves. I stared at the photograph, then at Lucas, then back at the photograph, the world tilted on its axis. "When was this taken?" I whispered, the words barely escaping my lips. My voice was hoarse with shock. Lucas looked at me, his gaze full of pity. 1982, he said gently. That's my mother, Isabella Diaz, and I'm the baby. It was taken shortly after my christening. The year echoed in my mind, a cruel, mocking whisper. 1982. That was the year Arthur and I had been desperately trying to conceive. The year of countless doctor's appointments, invasive procedures, and crushing disappointments. The year we had faced the agonizing truth that we would likely never have children of our own. That was the year I had cried myself to sleep night after night, longing for a baby, for the family I thought we were building. And all this time, Arthur had a baby. With another woman. In 1982, the initials LT plus ID suddenly made a horrific, undeniable sense. Lucas Thorne. Isabella Diaz. Forever. I swayed on my feet, the shock threatening to overwhelm me. My head began to throb. A dull ache behind my eyes. The clean, homey apartment now felt suffocating, spinning around me. "Please, Ellie," Lucas said, his hand gently guiding me towards a comfortable armchair. "You need to sit down. What I'm about to tell you, it's going to be difficult." I sank into the chair, my knees weak, the framed photograph still clutched in my trembling hands. My mind was a whirlwind of betrayal, grief, and an overwhelming sense of disbelief. Arthur, my Arthur, the man I had loved for 40 years, the man I had just buried, had kept such a monumental secret, a secret that had been living in apartment 4B for 8 years, right under my nose. My husband had a secret life, and I was just beginning to unravel it. I sank into the armchair, the photograph still in my hand, my mind reeling. Lucas's words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken history. He sat opposite me, his gaze steady, offering a silent invitation to listen. And so, he began to tell his story, a narrative that systematically dismantled the foundation of my life. "My mother, Isabella, worked at Mel's Diner downtown," Lucas began, his voice soft, almost detached, as if he were recounting someone else's life. "She met Arthur there. He was a regular, always ordering the same thing, always sitting at the same counter stool. He charmed her, told her stories of a lonely, unhappy marriage, a life he desperately wanted to escape." My breath hitched. Lonely? Unhappy? That wasn't the Arthur I knew. The Arthur I loved. We had our ups and downs, like any couple, but our life together had always felt full, vibrant, and loving. The thought that he would paint such a picture to another woman, a picture of misery, twisted a knot in my stomach. "She fell in love with him, you know," Lucas continued, a wistful note entering his voice. "He promised her the world, said he would leave his wife, that they would get married, start a new life together. She believed him. Completely. A bitter taste filled my mouth. The man who had vowed to me, who had promised me forever, was making the same vows to another." My head throbbed. "Then she got pregnant," Lucas said, looking away, his gaze fixed on a distant point on the wall. "That's when everything changed." Arthur panicked. He told her he couldn't leave his wife. He couldn't risk the scandal, the disruption to his life, his business. He gave her some money, a hefty sum, and disappeared, telling her he'd be back when he could. I felt a wave of nausea. All the while I was yearning for a child, enduring painful treatments, wishing for a miracle. Arthur had known he had a child he had abandoned. The cruelty of it, the profound deception, made me feel physically ill. The grief for Arthur was now warring with a searing anger. Lucas continued his narrative, his voice gaining a quiet strength. "My mother raised me alone. Arthur would visit occasionally, always secretly, always calling himself Uncle Mitch. He'd bring me toys, clothes, money for my mother. He was never truly present, never a father, but he was. There, in the periphery. Isabella died when I was 8, Lucas said, his voice cracking slightly, the first hint of raw emotion. Cancer. Arthur paid for the funeral, ensured she had a respectable burial. He attended too, but as a family friend. No one ever knew the truth. After Isabella's death, with no other family, Lucas was plunged into the impersonal world of the foster care system, a child lost and alone. The thought of Arthur, my Arthur, at Isabella's funeral, posing as a mere friend, while I mourned our childless life, was almost unbearable. When I turned 18, I tracked him down, Lucas confessed, his green eyes meeting mine. Not for money, not for revenge. I wanted to know my father. I wanted answers. I wanted to understand. Arthur, faced with his past suddenly made manifest, had clearly panicked. He had just started purchasing this building, a new investment for our future. He offered me this apartment, 4B, Lucas explained, rent-free, for as long as I needed it. He said it was for my mother, for the life she deserved but never had. But I knew the real reason. It was to keep me quiet, to keep his secret buried. The pieces of the puzzle began to click into place, forming a picture I never wanted to see. Arthur's increasingly frantic excuses about the building's maintenance costs, the unexpected repairs that seemed to eat into our savings, his occasional disappearances to check on the property that stretched into hours. I had always dismissed them as the natural woes of a property owner. Now, I understood. He was juggling two lives, maintaining a precarious balance, financially and emotionally, to protect his secret. The financial stress on the building wasn't just neglect, it was a deliberate drain, disguised. And then, Lucas dropped the final, devastating bombshell. He paused, looking at me with an expression of deep sympathy mixed with a trace of his own hurt. There's something else. Ellie, something you need to know about Serena. My blood ran cold again. Serena? What could she possibly have to do with this? 3 days before Arthur passed away, Lucas continued, his voice low. Serena came here, to this apartment. She stood right where you are now. She didn't say much, just that she had a message from Arthur. She told me, verbatim, check your husband's wallet, Lucas. There's something in there for you. And then she left. I stared at him, my mind struggling to process this new layer of deception. His wallet? I repeated, my voice hollow. Arthur's wallet had been in his nightstand, untouched since his death. I had seen it, but never opened it, too consumed by grief. Lucas nodded slowly. And Ellie, she also told me something else. She told me that for the past 8 years, the rent I was paying Arthur every month, the $800, was actually going directly to her. She had a separate arrangement with Arthur. She'd collect it from me, keep it, and in return, she'd make sure I was taken care of in the building, that my presence here remained a secret from you. The air left my lungs in a ragged gasp. Serena, not only had she accused me of greed, but she had been actively siphoning money from Arthur, using Lucas's existence as a leverage point. $86,400. That's what $800 a month for 8 years amounted to. More than the purported loss from Lucas's unpaid rent. My daughter-in-law, my son's wife, had been systematically stealing from Arthur and me, while simultaneously blaming me for Arthur's will. The betrayal was so profound, so multi-layered, it made me dizzy. My world, already shattered by Arthur's secret, now lay in a million pieces, revealing a landscape of lies and unimaginable deceit. If you're finding yourself glued to this story, don't miss a single twist. Make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next part of this unbelievable saga. My world just got turned upside down again, and the truth is even stranger than fiction. The drive home was a blur, the familiar streets, the autumn leaves swirling on the pavement. Everything seemed to recede into a meaningless backdrop against the maelstrom of emotions swirling inside me. Lucas's words echoed in my ears, each one a hammer blow to the image I had held of Arthur, of my life. The betrayal, the decades of lies, and then, the gut-wrenching realization about Serena, her calculated cruelty and greed. But one thought cut through the chaos, a singular focus. Arthur's wallet. Lucas's words, check your husband's wallet, resonated with an unnerving urgency. As soon as I pulled into the driveway, I rushed inside, ignoring the silent, accusing house. My feet carried me directly to our bedroom, to Arthur's dresser, where his personal effects remained untouched. The air in the room still carried a faint, comforting scent of his familiar cologne, a bittersweet reminder of the man I thought I knew. My trembling fingers reached for the brown leather wallet, its worn edges a testament to years of use. It felt heavy in my hand, suddenly imbued with an ominous significance. I opened it, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Inside were the usual contents: credit cards, a few bills, a faded photo of Ethan as a boy. But I knew, instinctively, there had to be more. I meticulously went through each compartment, each fold, my fingers searching for anything hidden, anything out of place. My breath hitched as I ran my thumb along the edge of his driver's license. Behind it, a thin, almost invisible flap of leather, expertly concealed, revealed itself. With agonizing slowness, I pried it open. Inside, tucked away, as if meant to be lost to time, was a folded photograph. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The image that emerged made the air leave my lungs. It was Isabella. She lay in a hospital bed, her face radiant despite the exhaustion, a tiny, swaddled newborn nestled against her. Lucas. But it was Arthur beside her that truly shattered me. He sat on the edge of the bed, holding Isabella's hand, his head bowed, his face alight with a tenderness I had rarely seen, even directed at me. There was no deceit in his expression, only raw, unfiltered love and vulnerability. This wasn't a casual fling. This was a man deeply connected to the moment, to the woman, to the baby. My vision blurred with tears, hot and stinging. I flipped the photo over, my fingers tracing the elegant script on the back. Isabella's handwriting: Lucas James Thorne, born March 15th, 1982, 7 pounds 4 ounces. He has your eyes. The date: March 15th, 1982. The exact year I had been enduring countless fertility treatments, desperately wishing for a child. For a family with Arthur. He had known. He had a son. He had a family. The one I yearned for, the one I wept over, was something he had quietly, secretly, created with another woman. All the while, he let me believe we were both barren, sharing in a mutual sorrow. The depth of that lie, that deception, was an abyss. As if the photograph wasn't enough, something else was tucked behind it. A yellowed, official-looking document. A birth certificate. My eyes scanned the familiar format, seeking the names. Mother: Isabella Elena Diaz. And under father: Arthur James Vance. My Arthur. My husband. Legally recognized as Lucas's father. This was not a fleeting affair. A moment of weakness. This was a deliberate choice. A second life. Meticulously hidden for 41 years. It wasn't a mistake. It was a parallel existence. My world didn't just collapse. It imploded. The walls of the room seemed to close in. The air grew thick, suffocating. The Arthur I knew, the rock, the loving husband, the honorable man, was a stranger, a master of deception. Just as I felt I might drown in the overwhelming tide of betrayal, my phone buzzed, startling me so violently I nearly dropped the precious, incriminating documents. It was Ethan. My son. His voice, when I answered, sounded tired, strained, utterly devoid of the usual anger he'd shown me in Mr. Sterling's office. "Mom? Can you talk?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Ethan, yes, I can talk," I managed, my voice hoarse, still raw from the deluge of emotions. "Look, Mom," he continued, a hurried urgency in his tone. "I need to see you tonight." My heart, already battered, gave another painful thud. Don't tell Serena? What could be so urgent, so secret, that he needed to hide it from his own wife? And why now, after their dramatic declaration of cutting all ties? The web of deceit, already so tangled, seemed to grow larger, more complex with every passing moment. "Yes, Ethan," I said, a new wave of worry washing over me. "I'll be there." I hung up the phone, the receiver feeling cold and heavy in my hand. The truth, like a ravenous beast, was devouring everything I thought I knew. Arthur's secret son, Serena's betrayal, and now Ethan's clandestine call. The pieces were hurtling towards a collision, faster than I could comprehend. The calm, grieving widow I had been just days ago was gone, replaced by a woman navigating a treacherous labyrinth of lies, desperate to find her way to the truth. 2 hours later, the twilight had deepened, casting long shadows across Ethan and Serena's meticulously manicured lawn. My knuckles were white as I clutched the faded birth certificate in my hand, the flimsy paper feeling like a lead weight. My heart hammered against my ribs, a nervous drumbeat echoing the tumultuous thoughts in my head. I pressed the doorbell, bracing myself. Ethan opened the door almost immediately, as if he'd been waiting just inside. His appearance sent a fresh pang of worry through me. His usually vibrant face was drawn, his eyes bloodshot and shadowed, hinting at a severe lack of sleep. He looked utterly exhausted, burdened. "Mom," he whispered, stepping aside. "Come in, quickly." He glanced nervously over his shoulder, then back at me. "Serena's at her book club. She won't be back for at least another hour." His voice was low, strained. We moved into the living room, a space usually filled with Serena's carefully curated decor, now feeling strangely hushed, charged with unspoken tension. I sat on the edge of the sofa, the birth certificate still clenched in my hand. There was no gentle way to deliver this news. "Ethan," I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I went to the apartment building today. I went to apartment 4B. I saw a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, a vague unease, but he remained silent. Lucas Thorne," I continued, "hasn't paid rent in 8 years. And the reason for that is because Serena has been collecting his rent, $800 a month, for 8 years. Ethan froze. His body, which had been slumped slightly, went rigid. His eyes, already tired, widened in disbelief. He stared at me. Then slowly, as if the air had been sucked from the room, he sank into the nearest armchair. "What?" he breathed, his voice barely a whisper. "No, Mom, that's impossible." Serena wouldn't. His denial was weak, laced with a dawning horror. I saw the rapid calculation in his eyes as he absorbed the gravity of what I was saying. 8 years of $800 payments. $76,000. $800, he whispered, aghast. She stole that much?" I watched him, a part of me grieving for the naive son who truly believed his wife was above such deceit. But I had to push further. "That's not even the worst of it, Ethan," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "One your father kept from me for 41 years. Your father had another son." His face, already pale, went ashen. He looked at me blankly, utterly uncomprehending. Without a word, I reached across the coffee table and slid Lucas's birth certificate towards him. My hand trembled as I pushed it across the polished surface. He picked it up, his fingers brushing against mine. His eyes scanned the document, moving from Isabella Diaz's name to the name listed under father, Arthur James Vance. My Arthur. His father. His breathing became shallow, his chest rising and falling erratically. He reread the name, then looked up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and profound pain. "It's Lucas's birth certificate, Ethan," I explained, my voice heavy with the weight of the revelation. "Your half-brother. Born in 1982, the son of Isabella Diaz, a woman your father had an affair with before you were even born. He abandoned them, Ethan. His own son and the woman who loved him. He kept Lucas a secret to protect his reputation, his life with me. He only gave Lucas a home in the building, rent-free, to keep him quiet." Ethan just stared at the document, his world crumbling around him, much like mine had that afternoon. He didn't deny it, didn't argue. The truth of it, stark and undeniable, was etched on his face. He eventually looked up at me, his voice barely audible. I had no idea about the rent. I swear, Mom, I didn't know. He paused, rubbing his temples. But Serena. She always had extra money. She always said it was from freelance work, or her family. And she was always asking Dad about his will, about the building. She'd badger him endlessly, asking if he was leaving me a good portion, if he was protecting our future. His head hung low, shame etched on his features. After Dad's diagnosis, Serena started talking about having him declared incompetent. She said if he was deemed unable to manage his affairs, it would be easier for us to challenge the will, to ensure the building came to us instead of you. She made it sound like she was protecting me, protecting our family. His voice was hollow, filled with a sickening realization. She wanted the building for herself, didn't she? She was trying to frame you, make you out to be the greedy one, so she could just take it all. The truth of Serena's calculated avarice, her manipulative scheme, finally dawned on Ethan. The depth of her deceit, her willingness to exploit his father's illness and her own husband's trust, painted a monstrous picture. He looked utterly broken, caught between the betrayal of his father and the monstrous manipulation of his wife. Suddenly, the familiar sound of Serena's car pulling into the driveway shattered the tense silence. The headlights swept across the living room window. Panic flared in Ethan's eyes, mirroring my own. "She's early," he hissed, grabbing Lucas's birth certificate from the table. "Hide it, Mom." He quickly tucked the document under the sofa cushion, his movements frantic. The front door opened, and Serena's cheerful voice, bright and oblivious, sang out, "Honey, I'm home." Book club was a riot. She stepped into the living room, her smile bright, only to falter, then freeze, as her eyes landed on me. The cheerful mask cracked, replaced by a wary suspicion. "Ellie, what are you doing here?" Her voice was colder now, sharper, her eyes narrowing. I met her gaze, a new resolve hardening within me. "We were just discussing the building." "Serena," I said, my voice calm, betraying none of the turmoil within. "Specifically, apartment 4B. I think we need to have a little chat about that tenant." A flicker of something fear crossed her face, quickly suppressed. She recovered quickly, her smile regaining a brittle edge. "Oh, Lucas Thorne? Yes, what about him? A real piece of work, that one. Always late with rent, always causing problems." She was clearly unaware, blissfully ignorant, that her entire meticulously constructed scheme, her web of lies, was about to unravel completely, spectacularly, and irrevocably. The calm before the storm. The morning after my turbulent evening with Ethan, a strange sense of clarity settled over me. The pain of Arthur's betrayal still throbbed, but it was now overlaid with a cold, clear determination. There were wrongs to right, and Lucas was an integral part of that. I called him, and we arranged to meet at a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town, a neutral ground for the revelations to come. He was already there when I arrived, nursing a black coffee, his expression thoughtful. I slid into the booth opposite him, placing Arthur's wallet, with the photograph and birth certificate, on the table between us. His eyes widened slightly as he recognized the wallet. "Lucas," I began, my voice softer than I intended. "Last night, after I left you, I found this." I carefully extracted the hospital photograph and the birth certificate, laying them side by side. Lucas's gaze fell upon the photograph. His breath hitched. He picked it up, his fingers tracing the outline of Isabella's face, then Arthur's, and finally, his own tiny infant form. His eyes, those green eyes, so like Arthur's, filled with tears, sparkling in the soft morning light. "He was there," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "He was actually there. I never knew. My mother never told me." The tenderness on Arthur's face in that faded image, the way he held Isabella's hand, was a raw, aching truth that Lucas had been denied his entire life. He looked at me, a profound sadness in his eyes. "Why, Ellie?" he asked, his voice choked. "Why did he abandon us? Why couldn't he just tell the truth?" I met his gaze, the anger I felt for Arthur momentarily replaced by a shared pain. "Because he was a coward. Lucas," I said, my voice firm. He was a man who valued his comfortable life and his reputation above everything else. He didn't have the courage to face the consequences of his actions, no matter the cost to others. The words, though harsh, felt like a necessary truth. Then, I shifted gears, moving from the emotional to the practical. Lucas, this birth certificate confirms you are Arthur's legal son. That means, under the law, you are his legitimate heir. You are entitled to half of his estate, including half of the apartment building. And more importantly, you are entitled to half of the money Serena stole from you. His head snapped up, a look of genuine surprise on his face. Inheritance? Money? He shook his head vehemently. Ellie, I don't want Arthur's money. I never did. All I ever wanted was to know my father, and to have a family. I don't care about the rest. I understand that, Lucas, I said, my hand reaching across the table to touch his arm. And I believe you. But Serena doesn't know that. She believes you're a threat to her inheritance, a pawn she can use. A new thought struck me, a memory from my conversation with Ethan. Lucas, I asked, did Serena ever make you sign any papers? Anything official, perhaps about your tenancy, in the last month or so? He paused, thinking. She came by about a month ago, saying she needed me to sign some lease updates for Arthur, something about new city regulations. I didn't think much of it at the time, just signed where she pointed. I even took photos, just in case I needed them later. He scrolled through his phone, then handed it to me. I examined the images, my heart sinking with each photo. These weren't simple lease updates. They were carefully crafted, fraudulent lease amendments. They stipulated that upon Arthur's death, Serena would be granted full property management authority over the building, including the collection of all rents and the power to make all financial decisions. The fine print effectively bypassed me entirely. It was a clear power grab, meticulously planned. The timing clicked into place. March 2016. That was when Arthur had his first major heart scare. The one that put him in the hospital for a week. That's when Serena must have known his health was failing. And that's when she started collecting Lucas's rent, a shadow income stream. She had been systematically siphoning funds, creating a separate financial ledger that made the building's income appear lower than it was. I pulled out a file I had brought with me, a collection of financial documents I'd found on Arthur's desk that morning. Look at this, Lucas, I said, laying them out. These are records of the building's income and expenses from Arthur's desk. For the past 8 years, Serena has been artificially depleting the building's reported income, masking her own theft. She meticulously painted a picture of the building barely breaking even, of me being a greedy old woman who would bleed it dry, so she could justify seizing control for herself, claiming she was saving it for Ethan's future. My voice grew hard, edged with steel. She created this narrative, Lucas, making me out to be incompetent or selfish, so when the time came, she could swoop in, take everything, and frame me as the villain. Just then, my phone rang, startling both of us. It was Ethan, his voice frantic, laced with a fresh wave of panic. "Mom!" he exclaimed. "She's gone! Serena!" She left early for errands with a suitcase. And Arthur's building deed, all the rental agreements, and his financial records for the building. They're all missing from his study. My breath hitched. Serena had fled. The pieces were finally converging. "I'm coming over, Ethan," I said, my voice firm. "And I'm bringing Lucas. It's time for you two to finally meet." The game was up. Serena's meticulously constructed house of cards was about to come crashing down, and this time, I was ready to watch it fall. The drive to Ethan's house felt impossibly long, the silence in the car heavy with anticipation and the weight of what was about to unfold. Lucas sat beside me, his usual calm demeanor tinged with a nervous energy. "I'm ready, Ellie," he said quietly, breaking the silence. His words, devoid of bitterness, struck a chord deep within me. Ethan flung open the front door even before I could knock, his face etched with worry and impatience. His eyes, usually fixed on me first, immediately darted to Lucas. His jaw dropped. "Jesus," he breathed, his voice thick with shock. You look just like Dad. Lucas offered a small, hesitant smile. You have his eyes too. Around the corners, he responded gently, his gaze meeting Ethan's. Two pairs of green eyes, Arthur's eyes, connecting for the first time. It was an awkward, poignant moment. Two strangers bound by blood and a shared deception. The half-brothers, finally, formally met. We moved into the living room, a different energy filling the space than the night before. No longer hidden, the truth was now the central figure. Lucas immediately pulled out his phone, showing Ethan the photos of the fraudulent lease amendments Serena had tricked him into signing. As Ethan scrolled through them, his face darkened with disgust and fury. She played me for a fool, Ethan muttered, running a hand through his hair. She made me believe she was looking out for us, for our future, I elaborated, detailing Serena's long-term financial manipulation. She's been systematically undermining the building's finances for years, Ethan, I explained, laying out the documents from Arthur's desk, making it look less profitable than it was. All so she could justify taking control. She planned this, meticulously, right down to painting me as a greedy, incompetent widow, so you wouldn't question her motives. Ethan listened, his head bowed, the shame and regret palpable in the room. I should have seen it, he said, his voice raw. I should have known. I'm so sorry, Mom. So sorry for everything. His apology, heartfelt and genuine, brought a small measure of comfort, a crack in the wall of estrangement that Serena had built between us. Just as we were trying to formulate a plan, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. It's Serena, he said, showing us the screen. Says she's dealing with a family emergency and will be out of contact for a few days. Buying time, clearly. Before we could fully process that, Lucas's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID, a puzzled frown on his face. It's Miss Evelyn Reed, from Riverside Property Management, he announced. He put it on speaker. Miss Reed's voice, crisp and professional, filled the room. Mr. Thorne, this is Evelyn Reed from Riverside Property Management. I'm calling to inform you that your lease for apartment 4B is terminated, effective immediately. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises. This decision is based on a review of your rent payment history and the explicit instructions from the new property manager, Mrs. Serena Vance, whose authority is now legally binding as per recent amendments to your lease agreement. My blood ran cold. Serena was moving fast. This was her preemptive strike. I snatched the phone from Lucas. Miss Reed. This is Eleanor Vance, I stated, my voice sharp with authority. I am the legal owner of Riverside Apartments. Those documents are fraudulent, signed under duress and misrepresentation. Serena Vance has no authority to terminate any leases, especially not Lucas Thorne's. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Mrs. Vance, I understand your concern, Miss Reed replied, her tone unwavering. However, my office has received legally binding documents appointing Mrs. Serena Vance as the property manager upon the demise of Mr. Arthur Vance. Until we receive superseding, legally verified proof of ownership and management authority from you, our instructions stand. Mr. Thorne's eviction will proceed. The call ended with a click. A stunned silence descended upon the room. We looked at each other. The gravity of the situation sinking in. Serena wasn't just trying to steal the building. She was actively trying to evict Lucas, her last vestige of control, before we could prove his paternity and invalidate her fraudulent claims. She was trying to erase him. A cold, steely determination settled over me. Serena had underestimated us. She thought she was playing a game of chess, but she was about to discover we were playing for keeps. We need to find her, I declared, my voice firm. And we need to find her now. Before she can do any more damage. Lucas, always practical, interjected. Serena always uses the same private car service for longer trips. They might know something. Ethan quickly called the service. After a tense few minutes, he hung up, a new urgency in his eyes. They said she requested a rush booking to the bus depot, and then took the express to Sacramento. Sacramento. The word hung in the air, a bell tolling. My mind raced, connecting the dots. Sacramento. That was where the county records office was located. That was where all property transfers were legally registered. Serena wasn't just fleeing. She was heading straight to the heart of where she could make her fraudulent claim to the building legally binding. She was going to try and forge a transfer of ownership, making it impossible for me, or Lucas, to reclaim what was rightfully ours. The race was on. The very next morning, armed with Arthur's original building deed, his death certificate, and the official will, Lucas, Ethan, and I walked into the Riverside Property Management office. Miss Reed, prim and unyielding, sat behind her desk, already braced for confrontation. "Mrs. Vance," she began coolly, "I regret to inform you that Mrs. Serena Vance provided us with a legally executed power of attorney, granting her full managerial control of the Riverside Apartments upon Mr. Vance's death. Dated just days before his passing, it was notarized and appears perfectly legitimate." My heart sank as she produced the document, Arthur's shaky signature visible, a testament to his heavily sedated state in those final days. Serena had anticipated everything. "Then explain this," I retorted, pushing Lucas's bank statements and money order receipts across her desk. "This is proof of Lucas Thorne paying Serena Vance $800 a month in rent, every single month, for the last 8 years. That's $76,800 that never made it into the building's official accounts. This is theft, Miss Reed." Orchestrated by Serena Vance. Miss Reed's professional composure, usually unshakable, began to crack. Her eyes widened as she scanned the meticulous records Lucas had kept. The reality of the financial fraud, blatant and undeniable, started to sink in. Next, Ethan, his face grim, placed his phone on the desk, displaying the photos of the forged lease amendments. "And these," he stated, his voice firm, "are the lease updates." Serena tricked Lucas into signing, giving her this power of attorney. They're designed to mislead and defraud, not to manage property legitimately. Miss Reed leaned back in her chair, a look of utter disbelief on her face. The weight of the evidence was overwhelming. "My God," she whispered. This is a felony, fraud and forgery." Without another word, she picked up her phone. "Mr. Thorne," she announced, her voice now authoritative, "your eviction is rescinded immediately. I am calling our legal department right now. Serena Vance will be facing charges." The immediate victory felt hollow. We still needed to find Serena. "She has a remote family cabin near Lake Tahoe," Lucas offered, always thinking practically. "It's secluded, hard to get to. It's where her family goes to hide when they want to disappear." But I had another theory. A much more urgent one. "No," I said, my mind racing. "She's not hiding yet. She's consolidating. She's in Sacramento. She took the bus there. That's where the county records office is. She's trying to transfer the building's ownership, legally." My premonition proved tragically correct. Lucas, Ethan, and I drove straight to Sacramento, arriving at the county records office just as it opened. We found Serena at a counter, her back to us, her usually meticulously styled blonde hair, now chopped short and dyed a harsh, unnatural red. She was hunched over a stack of documents, muttering to the clerk. She was attempting to transfer the building's deed into Ethan's name, but with herself listed as the sole managing agent, effectively cutting both of us out entirely. "Serena," I called out, my voice ringing through the quiet office. She spun around, her face a mask of shock and instant fury. Her eyes darted from me to the documents in her hand, then to the fleeing figures of Ethan and Lucas entering the office behind me. "The $76,800 you stole from Lucas," I stated, my voice steady. "And from Arthur. The $76,800 you used to fund your lavish lifestyle, all while accusing me of greed." I then pulled out Lucas's birth certificate, holding it aloft. "And the son Arthur truly left behind, the one you tried to erase." Serena's face contorted. "He's not Arthur's real son," she shrieked, her voice rising in a venomous pitch that drew the attention of everyone in the office. "He's a bastard, You're all conspiring against me. At that moment, Ethan stepped forward, Lucas by his side. Serena, Ethan said, his voice laced with disgust. It's over. Lucas is my brother, and you're a thief. You confessed everything, Serena, I revealed, pulling my phone from my pocket. Everything you told me about your plans, about the documents you created, about the money. I recorded it all. 2 security guards, alerted by the commotion, moved quickly to detain Serena. She struggled, screaming obscenities, but it was useless. Her game was finally, definitively, over. 6 months later, the Riverside apartments had undergone a remarkable transformation. The peeling paint was gone, replaced by a fresh, cheerful hue. The gardens were tended, the common areas sparkling. Lucas, now officially managing the building, had infused it with a new energy, a sense of community. Serena, facing insurmountable evidence, had pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and forgery, receiving a sentence of 3 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution. One afternoon, a kindly woman with warm, expressive eyes arrived at the building. It was Sofia Diaz, Isabella's sister, Lucas's aunt. She handed Lucas a small, tarnished silver locket. Inside were 2 tiny, faded photographs, a smiling Isabella and a much younger Arthur. Lucas, holding the locket, finally felt a tangible connection to the mother he barely remembered and the father he had only just begun to know. Sophia and I bonded instantly, sharing stories, laughter, and a profound sense of shared history. Ethan, free from Serena's manipulative grip, had filed for divorce. He and Lucas, now truly brothers, spent countless hours together, rebuilding a bond that had been stolen from them. Lucas, with Ethan's support, legally changed his name to Lucas Thorne Vance, fully embracing his identity. A year after Arthur's passing, the renovated Riverside apartments held a celebratory gathering on the newly transformed rooftop garden. The building, once a symbol of secrets and deceit, was now a vibrant hub of community. It was a beautiful, sunny afternoon, surrounded by tenants, friends, and our new, blended family. I stood to give a speech. Arthur kept secrets, I began, my voice clear and strong. And those secrets caused a great deal of pain. But in the unraveling of those secrets, we found something unexpected, something precious. We found a new family. My gaze swept over Lucas, then Ethan, then Sophia. Forgiveness is a journey, and healing is a process. But today, we are here, whole and united. This building, once a source of division, is now a symbol of new beginnings, of chosen family, of love that transcends expectations. It's imperfect, yes, but it's ours, and it's real. I looked at Lucas, my heart overflowing. Arthur may have left us a tangled mess, but he also, unknowingly, left us the gift of Lucas. And for that, I am eternally grateful. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes, for the first time in a very long time. The pain of Arthur's deception would always be a part of my story, but it no longer defined it. In the creation of this new, whole, albeit imperfect, family, I had finally found my peace.